Hey, gua, hey, gua, hey, gua, hey, gua, hey, gua, hey, gua, gua, gua. In the beginning, when the world was new, there was no separation between day and night. It was actually daylight all the time. Now, many of the animals really loved it. They could eat and eat and eat and eat, and soon they began to consume everything. Now, some of the animals, they wanted a place to hide from their enemies, a place to hide in darkness where they would be safe. But because of this consumption, because things began to be diminished and eventually disappear, if that's all you do is eat and consume, Gitchimanatu, the maker of us all, wanted to put a stop to that. Gitchimanatu took a huge wet blanket and threw it out over the sky, and everything was dark. Everything was so pitch black, nobody could see where they were going. Boom! The bear ran into a tree. Ah! He fell off a cliff. Everybody just kind of stumbled apart, stumbled around. And so they called out, "Hey, over here, where are you?" And they gathered together in a council circle. Now, Native people believe, as I believe, and I hope you believe, that we all have a good mind when we use it. When we put our minds together, we come up with the best ideas. So everyone was listened to. Everyone was given that respect. Someone said, "We need to go up and see what that thing is that shut out all the light." And it was decided that Eagle should go, because Eagle could fly higher than any other bird. But just as Eagle was taking off, a little tiny hummingbird slipped in under the eagle's feathers. Now, you know a hummingbird weighs less than a nickel when it begins its fall migration. And at the end of that one long trip, it weighs less than a penny, losing half of its weight. Well, this tiny little hummingbird was so light that the eagle didn't even feel it. And Eagle flew higher and higher. In a large circle, Eagle flew higher and higher until Eagle ran into that big wet blanket. Eagle turned and with its huge sharp talons ripped a large hole. And this bright light came shining down. Today, we call it the moon. And all the animals down below, they could see, and they cheered and roared and barked their approval. But just as the eagle turned to go down, Hummingbird zipped out. And because Hummingbird is the only bird that can fly backwards and upside down, Hummingbird took that sharp little beak and began poking holes in the sky. Now, at first, the animals on the ground below, they did not notice. They were so thrilled what Eagle had done for them. But as Eagle came flying down, they began to notice these tiny little lights appearing above them. More and more and more of them. And then they noticed that this pattern of little holes began to draw pictures. Like a great eagle flying across the sky. Or a huge bear, Ursus major, and a smaller bear, Ursus minor, the little bear. There were crabs and spiders. They were all manner of creatures. And the light grew brighter and brighter until they began to see it was Hummingbird who placed all those little pinpoints of light that you call stars. And especially when the animals saw their pictures being made, they cheered and roared their approval. And still to this day, once a month, that bright moon guides us on those dark nights. But then that huge hole, it will slowly mend itself before another one opens. But those little pinpricks of light, they are there every night. So even on the darkest night, we can find our way. And that is how that story goes. Hey, 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 gua. Hey, 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 gua. Hey, hey, gua. Hey, hey, gua. Hey, gua, hey, gua, gua, gua. In that long ago time, there was one, oh, she was so hot. One look at her and you were thirsty. She was so kind, generous beyond measure. She, most important, was so wise. She was such a good listener. She could help anyone, and many wanted her help. Many wanted her hand in marriage. There were many suitors who sought her approval, but somehow none of them were quite good enough for her. Now her parents said, you know, you won't always be so beautiful. As you get older, it might be harder to find a mate, a partner. You should choose one now. She was reluctant. There were two who never gave up. Two who still pursued her. One was tall and lanky. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The whooping crane, with a little red on top, a little black at the tip of its wings, pure white feathers. Now, when Whooping Crane was on the ground, sometimes he seemed a little awkward. But when Whooping Crane took flight, he could fly for hours, higher than any other bird. Actually, we now know that cranes are the highest flying bird on the planet. They will fly over the tallest mountains in the world. The other one was Hummingbird. Hummingbird with his wings moving in that figure eight, zipping here and there. She was reluctant to admit it, but with that bright ruby throat and that emerald green back, Hummingbird was nearly as handsome as she was. So she decided maybe she would let them decide through a race. They would have a great race to the distant mountains, Katua, and back once more. And so it was announced, and all the animals gathered. Now, some of them cheered for the crane. Most of them cheered for the hummingbird. The hummingbird was so fast, they thought for sure he was going to win. The journey to Katua, the sacred mountains, and back, it would take at least 7 days, a full week of flying. So on that morning, when the race began, the hummingbird zipped up, circled 3 times, zip, 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 and then zoom, raced off. Woohoo! Everyone cheered. Whereas the crane started running in the wrong direction. Everyone said, hey, the mountains are over here. But Crane awkwardly ran and caught the wind and began to soar. But Crane was looking for a place where the sun had already warmed the earth, and that warm air rising would give him lift. And with his long wings spread, he could circle higher and higher, letting the rising warm air carry him. And soon, when he was high enough, he turned and headed towards the mountain. And in this way, he could glide for hours without flapping. Now the hummingbird, zoom, zip, 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 raced on up ahead. Finally, near dark, the hummingbird stopped, fed, ate a few insects. They are mostly nectivores, eating mostly nectar from flowers, but they will occasionally eat insects, extra protein, extra energy. But as the hummingbird went to sleep, the crane kept soaring all day and into the night. Somewhere early the next morning, Whooping Crane actually passed the hummingbird and stopped by a small stream to preen his feathers, catch a few crawdads, maybe a snake, get a little food. Now, Hummingbird woke up, preened his feathers, zipped up, and took off and was amazed to see that Whooping Crane had passed him. Hummingbird redoubled his effort, flew as fast as he ever could. And you know, they can fly at incredible speeds. Crane took his time. After he had refreshed himself, he flew off looking for another thermal. Again, rose quite high, and then soared towards the mountains. The next day, when Hummingbird raced off, it was almost lunchtime before he passed the Whooping Crane. And the third day, it was after lunch. The fourth day, they circled the mountains and they headed back, and it was late afternoon before Hummingbird passed the crane. On the 5th day, it was early evening. On the 6th day, the hummingbird did not see the crane. On the 7th day, the crane arrived early in the morning, stopped by a small pond on the edge of the village, took his time preening, making his feathers as beautiful as he could, and then proudly came strutting in to the council grounds. All the birds were amazed. Whooping Crane had won, but they waited to see when the hummingbird might come back. The hummingbird came late in the afternoon and basically plopped down. It was so beaten and bedraggled. It was decided. Whooping Crane had won. It was decided. Or was it? She went over and she whispered in the crane's ear. Now what she said, I do not know. If I knew, I would tell you. But let me tell you what I do know. Whooping Crane turned beet red. How many of you ever blushed when you were embarrassed? You know, that red patch on a crane's head, that's not feathers. That's actually skin. And just like you turn red when you are embarrassed, cranes do that. Oh, Crane was so beet red, but whatever she said, I do not know. She decided not to marry. That is a choice. She decided instead she would be wed to the entire village. She became a wise one, a medicine woman, a healer, a midwife who helped children come into this world and helped the elders cross over to the world beyond. All sought her counsel. And he, Whooping Crane, he settled for one of his own tribe, another Whooping Crane. And they lived happily together and raised many offspring. But even when he was an old man, and cranes are long-lived birds, sometimes he'd be sitting there and he'd think of that glorious day when he won the great race. And then he would think about what she said and he would blush once more.